For years, whenever we talked about inequality in tech in schools, it was always the digital divide.
Right. Who had a computer, who had internet access, that was the whole conversation.
Exactly. But what's really striking in the research we're diving into today is that, well, that gap, the hardware gap among teens, is pretty much closed.
Yeah, it's almost gone. Something like 95% of teenagers now have a smartphone or access to high-speed internet, regardless of class or race. The hardware divide is basically history.
But the inequality, the educational inequality, that hasn't gone away at all.
Not even close, it's just shifted. And the core idea here, the argument in the source material, is that the new digital divide isn't about access anymore. It's not about if the tech is there.
Okay, so what is it about then?
It's about value, how the technology gets used, and maybe more importantly, how schools, how teachers discipline that use, how they decide what's worthwhile.
Discipline. Okay, so our mission today is to really unpack that shift. We're looking at how basically the same kind of behavior from students messing around online, digital play, as the book calls it, gets treated completely differently in 3 schools.
Yeah, schools serving really different student populations, and we want to understand why those differences are so critical for, who gets tagged as the next potential innovator.
Right. So let's get into this core concept, the discipline of play.
Okay. So the idea is that students, just by playing around online gaming, social media, creating stuff, they develop some pretty serious digital skills.
Yeah.
Communication, media making, sometimes even basic coding or understanding systems.
Mm-hmm.
Real skills.
Mm-hmm.
But the teachers, they're positioned as, like, gatekeepers.
Yeah.
They're the ones deciding if all that activity, that digital play, counts as valuable academic cultural capital or if it's just junk, a distraction.
And cultural capital, just to clarify for everyone, that's the stuff, the skills, the knowledge that actually helps you succeed, that looks good on paper, right?
Exactly that. What society values, what opens doors. So let's look at the first school, Heathcliff. This is an affluent private school, mostly white students.
Okay.
At Heathcliff, technology is seen as, well, an asset, pure and simple. It's there to nurture creativity, to train, the next Steve Jobs, basically.
The book describes the tech, their iPads for everyone, as an inlet, a window the teachers could look through to see the students' potential, their creativity.
Right. And there's this great story about a student, Juliana. She's in history class working on her iPad.
And suddenly this super loud Katy Perry music video just starts blasting in a quiet classroom.
Yeah, total accident, huge disruption. But the teacher, Miss Rosen, she doesn't freak out. She doesn't shame her.
What did she do?
She smiles. And she sort of weaves it into the lesson with humor, asks Juliana something like, is Miss Perry going to feature in your news report? And then encourages her to actually use her interest in digital media in her project.
Wow. So the play, the mistake even, it wasn't shut down. It was almost welcomed, integrated.
Exactly. Validated. Because the underlying assumption is these kids are future innovators. Their digital explorations are part of their path to success.
Okay, hold that thought.
Yeah.
Because the contrast with the second school, Shelton, couldn't be sharper, could it?
No, night and day. Shelton is a middle-class public school, mostly Asian students. And here, digital play, it's seen immediately as a threat.
A threat to what?
To academic integrity, to focus, to test scores. The tech here wasn't an inlet into creativity. It was primarily a tool for surveillance.
Surveillance? How so?
Well, there's this scene in a music class. Students are supposed to be composing, but the room is described as, like, dead silent. And the teacher, Miss Bardo, she actually shows the researcher her computer screen. And it's this grid showing in real time exactly what is on every single student's screen. It's like professional grade monitoring software.
Whoa, okay.
And then she spots this one kid, Luke, watching a hip-hop music video instead of composing.
Ah, and her reaction? Not like Mrs. Rosen's, I'm guessing.
Not even close. Instant public shaming. She yells his name across the room. Luke, stop watching the MV. Get back to your project. Just like that. Kills the activity, makes an example of him.
Even if he wasn't bothering anyone, like maybe he had headphones.
Exactly. The sources make that point. He had headphones on, wasn't distracting others, but the act of watching the video, the digital play itself, was treated as dangerous. Out of bounds.
Because the focus there was so intensely on, what, test prep, measurable outcomes.
Totally. High-stakes testing prep was huge. Digital play was just seen as a risk, something that could derail those scores. No room for exploration.
Okay. So Heathcliff plays innovation, Sheldon.
Yeah.
Play is threat. What about the third school, Cesar Chavez? Working class, mainly Hispanic students. How did they handle tech?
At Chavez, it's kind of seen as irrelevant. The tech itself is there. They had Chromebooks, interactive whiteboards, similar stuff.
So similar tools again, but a different approach.
Completely.
Yeah.
The whole focus was on teaching what they call basic skills, stuff for, the 21st century labor market.
Like what specifically?
Typing, online research, but very basic. Using Google Docs, following instructions. It was very much about digital labor, repetitive tasks, not creation.
So digital play, like gaming or social media.
It wasn't seen as threatening, like at Shelton, but it definitely wasn't seen as valuable, like at Heathcliff. It was just unrelated to learning.
How did they handle it then, if it was gaming?
It was sometimes allowed, but strictly as a reward. Like if you finish your boring digital worksheet, then maybe you can play Minecraft for 10 minutes.
So Minecraft, which can be incredibly creative and complex.
Right. Building worlds, collaborating. But it was framed purely as downtime, a break from the real digital work, which was the repetitive stuff. Teachers actively dismissed things like making videos or online communication as just not relevant to their future jobs.
Okay, this is fascinating. 3 schools, similar tech, similar kid behaviors, playing a game, watching a video, but wildly different responses from the adults.
Innovation, threat, irrelevance.
It really drives home that this isn't just about individual teachers having a bad day, is it? It's something bigger.
Exactly. It's about the school's underlying organizational culture, the collective beliefs and assumptions that teachers hold about who their students are and what their futures look like. And those assumptions are deeply tied to race and class.
Right. Let's dig into that culture piece, because the why behind these differences is crucial.
Okay, so let's look at Shelton again, the threat school. The research describes the teacher environment there as really toxic. Every man for himself, lots of gossip, intense pressure, public shaming, even among colleagues.
Wow, okay, so the teachers themselves felt under surveillance, maybe.
Kind of. Super high stress, very competitive. And the argument is, this stressful environment led them to adopt and reinforce certain stereotypes about their students.
Specifically, the Asian students.
Yes. They started seeing them through the lens of stereotypes, like the cold hacker or the kid pushed by a tiger mom. Basically seeing them as this inherent academic threat that needed constant monitoring and control.
So the teacher's own stress and workplace anxieties got projected onto the students as a negative racial stereotype.
That's the argument. The stress needed an outlet, and it found one in rationalizing intense control over these specific students, framing their digital activities as inherently suspicious.
That's quite a dynamic. Now, contrast that with Chavez, the irrelevant school. You said their teacher culture was different.
Yeah, totally the opposite vibe. It was described as very supportive, like a family, all in this boat together. Teachers helped each other out, felt collectively responsible.
So a positive environment, but it still led to limiting the kids' digital horizons. How does that work?
Because that supportive family atmosphere allowed them to view their working class Hispanic students through a different but still limiting stereotype. The friendly, hardworking immigrant who needs care and practical skills.
Ah, so the care itself shapes the expectations.
Precisely. The positive view led them to believe these students needed protection and, most importantly, basic, concrete job skills for the labor market. Typing, simple software use, creative digital play, making media, coding that was seen as, irrelevant to the future they envisioned for these kids. Nice, maybe, but not essential.
So even the positive stereotype channeled them away from innovation pathways.
Yes. It disciplined their play by deeming it unnecessary for the predetermined roles they were expected to fill, caring but still limiting.
It really highlights how these existing stereotypes model minority, cold hacker, friendly immigrant, future worker. They're just sort of available. And the specific school culture, the teacher's own experiences, kind of dictates which stereotype gets applied.
And that choice, often unconscious, profoundly shapes how students learn to see their own digital skills and creative potential. Do they see it as valuable or as something to hide or just as unimportant?
Okay, so summing this up for everyone listening, the big takeaway here seems to be, once tech access is pretty much equal, what really matters is the context.
Exactly. The organizational culture, the collective assumptions of the educators, that becomes the main thing, determining whose digital curiosity gets nurtured into valuable skills and whose gets shut down or ignored.
It really makes you think about your own life, doesn't it? In your workplace or even community groups.
Yeah.
What kind of activities are seen as innovative versus just messing around?
And who gets the benefit of the doubt? Who's messing around is seen as potential genius, and whose is just wasting time.
Who gets labeled the innovator? It forces you to see how context shapes value.
It really does.
And here's a final thought to leave you with, something really provocative from the research. While the students at Shelton and Chavez, the minority students, were clearly viewed through these collective group-based stereotypes, the study found that white students across all the schools tended to be seen as individuals, their success or failure. That was attributed to their personal effort, their individual talent, or maybe their lack of focus, not to their group identity.
So they weren't carrying the weight of a stereotype in the same way.
Pretty much. The source suggests this invisibility of whiteness, being seen just as a person rather than a representative of a race or a class group, acted as a kind of shield. It protected them from the negative side of the discipline of play.
Meaning their digital explorations were more likely to be judged on their own merit, or at least judged through the lens of individual potential.
Exactly. It meant they were more likely to be seen as individual innovators by default. Which raises a pretty big question for the digital age, doesn't it? Is being judged purely as an individual, free from the baggage of group stereotypes? Is that the ultimate educational privilege now?